I don't know about you, but when I started practicing law, I never thought long term. Never thought that 20 years or 30 years down the road, I would be practicing in a way that was different than the way I started. Forget about technology and advances in technology or recession slash depression. Forget about all that stuff. I just thought that how I started practicing, the methodology, the subject matter, and so forth, would be roughly the same. Yeah, new decisions would come down, new laws would come down, and so forth, that would be intellectually challenging, that would cause perhaps different results. But basically, the parameters of what I had learned in school and in my first few years of practice would be the same later years of my practice. So I ask you today, what changes the way you practice law? Because I know there were a lot of changes in the way I practiced law. Well, one is sort of a negative. The recession that we've experienced, and without getting into politics, I think we've gone through a depression, not a recession. I think that's just a nice way for politicians to talk about the severity of what happened and is still we're still in the midst of. But aside from that, let's call it a recession. That impacts our practice. We may lose clients who no longer can afford legal services. Our own economics may change. For example, just a few years ago, Karen Mathis, formerly the president of the American Bar Association, said that 400,000 lawyers were going to retire within the next 10 years. And lawyer after lawyer that I talked to says, I may have wanted to retire, but my 401k has gone south. So we're not retiring quite so soon. That's sort of on the negative side of it. On the positive side, recession. Okay, now why would I say on the positive side? Well, because it depends on your practice area. If you're involved in the bankruptcy field, for example, you are very busy, still are, and you will be busy for a year, 2 years, or 3 years from now, because people have suffered. Our citizens have suffered, and bankruptcy is the one way that many of them have been able to release some of the pressure, some of the burdens that they're facing. Somebody said that in the last 6 months, there have been more causes of action created than in any time previously in the history of this country. And what they were talking about was change. We've had a number of laws. In fact, we can't seem to keep our politicians off of the books. They keep creating more laws. It doesn't matter which political party is in power. We're just creating more laws. And the laws then have to be interpreted. One segue, side commentary. Mortgage relief was supposed to be an avenue for homeowners to keep their homes. Mortgage relief in the sense of reducing the principal payments, stretching out interest payments, making 20 or 30-year mortgages perhaps a little bit longer, maybe not longer, but with a balloon payment so people now could stay in possession of their house. Well, there were a number of people who have taken retainers from the homeowners in order to represent them before agencies to get this mortgage relief. Admittedly, there were some who were unscrupulous and took the money and didn't do the work they promised. But in reaction to that, at least in California, taking a retainer in a mortgage relief matter now is illegal. Not only is it a felony, but it's also a violation of the rule of professional conduct. Bad enough that you're going to go to jail if you're one of these people. But not only will it be a felony, you're going to go to jail, which would cause you to lose your license anyway, but now you're going to have a hearing before the state bar. They're going to take your license away affirmatively. That seems to me to be ridiculous. Number one, there are plenty of laws on the books already to jail unscrupulous people who take money from the homeowners. But more importantly, these homeowners now are not going to get representation because lawyers are not going to do work for people who are economically marginal to begin with without some kind of retainer in advance. So it seems to me that the state bar and our state legislators have not done homeowners a big favor by passing this law. But the point I want to make beyond that is that wherever there are changes, and as I indicated a moment ago, there have been tremendous changes in the laws just in the last 6 months, let alone the last 2, 3, 4 years. And again, it has nothing to do with political party. When there is change, there is work for lawyers. Let me talk now about a situation that's neutral. I mentioned negative change, positive change, and that all depends on the practice area that you're involved with. Some practice areas are hurt, some practice areas are helped. In the area of aging, and no matter the desire of the lawyer to retire, but now feeling forced to remain in practice in order to maintain a lifestyle, in order to put food on the table and so forth. At some point, there will be the requirement, the need, the irresistible urge to retire, not to work so hard, not to miss out on what Karen Mathis called the second season. So this is something that's really important for us to consider. And most of us are unwilling to consider it because one of the blessings of practicing law is that it's intellectually challenging, and you don't need to be a 4-minute sprinter, 4-minute mile sprinter in order to practice law. So as long as your brain is active and you can get around, you can practice law. But that's the problem, because we think we're immortal and we want to practice law until the end. Sort of the expression of dying in our boots. There is one element, though, that forces us to consider changing the way we practice law. And I'll get into that in our next segment.